Hey, good morning, teammates. Glad to see another packed house to talk about, the flagship efforts in network modernization across our Army, thing called Next Gen C2. Here today, we have a great panel that kind of spans the life cycle of any program or any material or concept solution. On my left, we have General Mike Kalushin, our CFT director and great teammate on the other side of our campus. In the middle, we have our great battle buddy, Colonel Julia Donnelly. And then to my left, my good friend, my battle buddy, Mr. Ward Roberts, who's our deputy PEO for C3N. Today, we'll be talking about Next Gen C2 and how it spans its life cycle, but it's really about how do we get this capability out into the hands of the warfighter. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to General Kalushin to introduce himself, and then we'll move down the line.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody. This is a packed house, and certainly we knew it would be. Maybe not to this extent. We probably could have filled up the largest room here today because this is a very important topic and everyone is super interested in it, and as you should be. This is the Army's #1 transformation priority, right? And so the Army is converging everything it has to make sure that next generation command and control is a success. I've been fortunate enough to serve. General Rainey hired me a couple of years ago, along with a couple other teammates, to stand up from an experimentation and S&T standpoint what we think a data-centric C2 system should look like in the future to enable our warfighters. And so we started that experimentation S&T effort down at our headquarters in Austin. I was there the last couple of years. We got through PCC 6. That was the azimuth check to make sure we were going in the right direction. General George believed we were. Now we're moving to prototype, right? So I'm fortunate enough now to be the CFT director, the C2 CFT director, where I can have influence in the prototype phase of this too. So really excited to be here and excited to be a part of this program.
Good morning. I'm Colonel Julia Donnelly. I'm the Chief of Signal School Commandant. I'm also very excited to be here in this really, really important topic of next generation C2. As the enterprise has been looking to modernize acquisition and get things out into the hands of the soldiers faster, Can you hear me now? Obviously not, if you answer me. So as we're getting the equipment in the hands of the soldiers faster, it's really my responsibility to prepare those soldiers to receive that equipment and actually make it usable for their commanders. And so that's a task that's obviously huge if we're going to be fielding Next Gen C2 across the entire Army within a very short amount of time. So we're looking to modernize the way we train, and we have a great opportunity with the transformation of TRADOC and AFC with changes that are coming to the actual, what will be T2Com as the new organization. So it's a huge opportunity as we're transforming the acquisition side of things and getting the equipment out there faster. I have the opportunity to make changes at the schoolhouse, which I think we've all wanted to do for a very, very long time. So looking forward to the questions today. Thank you.
All right, as Shimon introduced me, my name is Ward Roberts, currently the acting deputy PEO. My real job is the assistant PEO for integration. So as we have kind of broken down our stovepipes of delivering holistically individual products and started creating the layers and structuring our program offices to go after layers, my fundamental job is to kind of build that bridge between layers, to drive the architecture, to drive the API standards, so that as the different PMs are delivering their different pieces of the stack, my job is to make sure they all kind of come together. So that's kind of the role I'm bringing here. And so I'll talk a little bit about the PEO big picture stuff, and then a little bit about that kind of integration role as we go through the conversation.
All right, good. We'll kick it right off. General Kalushin, over to you, first one. How do we've struggled, or folks are trying to put their finger on what exactly is Next Gen C2? So the question would be, how do you define, as the CFT director, what Next Gen C2 is?
Very simply stated, Next Gen C2 is intended to be data-centric, right? We're moving away from network-centric operations to data-centric operations. Next Gen C2 is a command and control, a complete command and control warfighting system, right? So if you think about all the components and the way, if you're unaware of the way that we've broken down the ecosystem, which is Next Gen C2, the data layer is foundational. That is the most important thing that we have to get right. It is the sharing of data, which is the most important aspect of next generation command and control. From there, we are going to have light applications that are able to access that data, right? And so the application layer that sits on top is the user interface. It is your iPhone. It is the apps on your iPhone using that analogy. That is what it is intended to be. Simple, intuitive, easy to learn. Infrastructure is the third layer in the stack. And the infrastructure is not only the cloud-based, because the cloud is important. We want to be cloud native, not cloud dependent. And so we want to be able to push infrastructure or push the cloud all the way down to the tactical edge. And we would do that through low swap, high capacity edge compute. We're doing it through the cloud. And it's also the infrastructure that we're using to make sure that our command posts are lighter, faster, more mobile, and more survivable. And then there's the transport, which many of us in this room are very intimately familiar with. It's the transport side of this. How do you move the data around effectively on the battlefield? It's the means of transport, whether it's terrestrial, SATCOM, commercial capabilities. That's the most important thing that we're focused, but also the software-defined network. How do we ensure that we have a truly intelligent and threat-informed network for the future? Because we are going to be fighting against a peer adversary on many fronts. And if we don't have a survivable network, then everything that we're doing in the data layer isn't going to matter. So we have to make sure that all of those layers are interoperable and interdependent, right? And so we figure out what that looks like and how that's orchestrated. But that's really what the basis of Next Gen C2. My commander, General Rainey, told me it's Next Gen C2 is about putting the commander back in command and control, empowering the commander to make sure the commander can make more, better, faster decisions than the enemy. That's ultimately what matters. It can't be complicated. It has to be easy to use. It has to be accessible. And we can get really deep in the discussion today about how do we ensure that we are getting all of the data and synthesizing, ingesting all of that in time for a commander to make the right decisions on the battlefield against, once again, a peer enemy on multiple fronts.
Thanks, sir. So what I would like to do is, again, moving along the lines of defining Next Gen C2, I'll come to you, Ward, and ask, for industry and for other teammates who's interested, can you give discrete examples across the layers of particular capabilities that are new in Next Gen C2?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. I'm going to try to avoid using any vendor-specific capabilities, but I think at the app layer, what we look at is, as General Kalusta mentioned, very, very lightweight user examples of apps, but key aspect being that they're all consuming the same data layer. I think a common map engine, a common chat services, those kind of things. I think we've looked at a lot of solutions. If I jump down to the infrastructure layer, I think that's where I'll hit a little bit more specific kind of technologies. So edge compute, software-defined networking appliances, the routing and infrastructure that enables the transport to work in that infrastructure layer, whether it be mounted in a vehicle or a dismounted solution. That's where that happens at. The edge devices we're using for either a tablet or a EOD to allow the soldier to interface with the applications are kind of bucketed in that infrastructure category. And then the transport, that's physically the actual movement of the RF over the beyond line of sight or line of sight capabilities. So that's where the emitters, waveforms, and that kind of aspect. Traditionally in the past, routing and transport have kind of been bucketed into one solution, and everyone kind of came with their own approach. So I think if I'm a vendor doing routing and that kind of infrastructure, I'm in the infrastructure bucket with the compute side of that. A key aspect we looked at in the past is stop separating compute and baseband. Compute and baseband can be one device, so I think that all is kind of bucketed in the infrastructure layer there. And then the easiest and most transparent one is the transport devices. So if you're a radio vendor, you're a SATCOM vendor, you're still uniquely in that transport bucket. And I think one of the things we're trying to do on the ASALT side is reorganize the structure of the program offices and the programs to that structure. not just inside of PEO C3N. I think across all of ASOL, we're trying to figure out what the optimized mix of PM roles, programs to align with that kind of dispersion of the technologies across that stack. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate it, Ward. And back to you, General Kalushin. So along the line of helping folks understand where we are in the movie, how is this particular effort that we're doing with Fourth ID different from what we did last year at PCC 5, at Capstone 5?
I think the number one thing is scale, right? So what PCC 5, we delivered a capability to an armor battalion with a brigade headquarters on top of it as a HICON. We are now fielding to a division, right? And we're going to field this to a division headquarters on down to include enablers, right? We haven't done that part yet. So there's so much that we're going to have to learn, because not only is it, to this point, it's all been about focusing on the intuitive, easy to learn aspect, making sure that operators can quickly learn how to use the capability and employ it in warfighting. Now we also have to figure out, what do the sustainers do with it? What do the signaleers do with it? How do we employ it at scale, right? How do we employ it at scale? We talk about light, mobile, fast, survivable CPs, right? So those are the things that are going to be a lot different. We're also adding capability, right? Because Next Gen C2 will never be finished. We are always adding capability. We're always looking to see how we're going to be able to quickly on-ramp and off-ramp capability as the mission requires, as the threat evolves. So those are some of the big things that we have to be focused on, but truly the scale of this thing is going to be massive. The training, the sustainment, the ability to manage a network, the cybersecurity aspect that we've now really have to figure out, thinking through, all of that becomes so much harder, exponentially harder, when you go from a battalion to a division. And this will be their chief. Number one, General Pat Ellis, the CG of 4ID, has said explicitly, this will be the only C2 system I use at Project Convergence. So we are going to depend entirely on using this prototype capability for that rotation. And that's where we're going to learn. The good thing is we are learning, right? We are moving into the prototype phase. We are by far nowhere near having a production environment in place. This is all about learning. And we're learning with some of our best commanders in the Army, telling us, based on warfighter feedback, where we need to go with this capability. Because I can tell you right now, what we have is not perfect. It's not even close, right? So we are building and becoming better. But I can also tell you what we have now is better than what we had at PCC 5. And when we go to PCC 6, it'll be better than what we have today. So we're going to continuously evolve the software, because once again, this is a data-centric thing. We are evolving the data layer. We're adding more capability. We're going to add more front-facing applications for warfighting to replace those warfighting functions. That's where we're going. That's the difference. But I'll just kind of that long answer, but just to get back to the point, scale in every regard of our tech stack is the big difference between what we've accomplished to this point and where we're expected to be in 10 months. When we deploy to PCC 6 at the National Training Center.
All right. So I'm going to throw an audible, but I threw the signal to my battle buddy. So Julia, so with all of this change and rapid change, we went from C2 fix. We did about 18 months of that. Next Gen C2 was supposed to be this thing off to the right in 27. We are live now. So then there's ITN still with legacy units. How do you keep our signaleers, our future leaders, and our trainers smart and able to support and enable their commanders in the field?
Well, clearly I have to ask the trail boss for fielding the schoolhouse first with equipment, right? No, so we have to think differently, right? We can't do the things that we did in the past at the schoolhouse, across the System Corps, in order to support everything that's going on in the modernization with Next Gen C2. In the past, we waited until something was a program of record and put in our requirements. And then once 51% of the Army was fielded and the majority of the Army looked kind of the same, then we received the equipment and then we changed the tasks and then we trained the soldiers. We obviously cannot do that. We can't wait. So we were recently, of course, we've been very involved in C2 Fix, doing a lot of the assessments taking that feedback back. We're building out an S-SMART program to kind of bring people up to speed. Is a bit of a gap because we realize that the leaders out there don't know what's going on. The truth of the matter is, with this new way of doing command and control, it's everybody at every echelon. I have to change the training institutionally at the schoolhouse. I have to prepare the critical tasks for the operations, for the operational force, that they're aware of what they're going to be training on. I have to train leaders across all MOSs. Unfortunately, right now, the way that the critical tasks are built are really heavily rooted in 25 hotel, or it's in WIN-T. So we just did the 25 hotel critical task board last week and this week. We're getting the outbrief tomorrow. So if anybody's at the NCO panel at the GCC tomorrow, you're invited to stay behind and listen to the outbrief from 25 hotels. We are going to have to change almost every single critical task that a 25 hotel in particular gets. And looking at much more signal theory, moving well away from equipment-based training. Like right now, we are into like by name, WIN-T, other vendors specific training. We need to train our soldiers on go back to basics. We've been talking about going back to basics for a very long time. But I'll try and explain maybe my interpretation of it. So we were at JRTC a few months ago, saw 101st in the box. They had been the focus of C2 Fix, and that focus had been lifted and shifted right to the next unit. And so those soldiers are there with this new equipment at JRTC, and they didn't even know where to start. They would call chief, and they didn't even know what troubleshooting steps to start to ask for help with, because they didn't even understand what they were looking at. And so that was a bit of an eye-opener for all of us at the schoolhouse. We knew we had to change. And so we've started a basic communicator module with the 25 Bravos. We're expanding that to all the primary 4 MOSs, going back to signal flow, signal theory, OSI model, some of those basics. So it doesn't matter if they don't understand what's actually in front of them. They understand what the basic components of that equipment are. They understand routing and switching and baseband and transport. Because they need to understand where they fit within the entire stack of next-gen C2 so that they can enable the warfighter. So hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Julia. Ward, back over to you. So with all of the change and change happening up and down the stack, up and down the big A acquisition, how do you plan to keep the warfighter centered while being transparent with industry and the Hill?
So being transparent across all 3 of those is really definitely a challenge. I think so. Fundamentally, the starting with both the TIC and the C2 Fix, kind of kicking off, getting us out of the lab and into the field was a fundamental mindset change. I think, and in the past, in the early days, we got requirements out of a schoolhouse where a guy in the basement who's been there for 20 years writing requirements heard somebody tell him it was a cool thing to do, wrote a requirement. 10 years later, we produced a product, and then 10 years later, it was 10 years out of date by the time you finally got to the field. I think shifting the culture of the mindset, not just of the program office side, but the requirement side, the force modernization side, has helped us put acquisition guys with the unit. And I love the fact that you showed your 4ID badge earlier. I think the fact that we are that closely embedded with the units in the development phase of programs as getting us more connected to the warfighter, I think that allows us, the CFT, the schoolhouse, the ACMs, the COE representative, to all be in the same conversation with the unit commander, getting that feedback so we can evolve the programs. The flip side of trying to be that agile is how do we communicate that back to industry and then back to the Hill? I think we're struggling working through processes that have been in place for decades now, and how do we communicate to the Hill? There's some pretty rigor there, some Army leader messaging that has to go out first, and we got to follow behind that. So I think our challenge is how do we get that to industry, and how do we communicate it to the Hill so that we can be responsive to the warfighter and not be lagging behind saying, I hear what you're saying, but I'm waiting on an appropriation change, or I'm waiting on a new requirement. So I think 2 things we're going to try to do. First, let me talk about industry. I think I'm going to go even farther. There are industry partners that are in those formations with those same conversations at the same time we are. So there's a team approach on the ground. And I think what we need to do is take those lessons learned, capture it from my perspective into an architecture, and then communicate that architecture out to industry. been several conversations. I used the minivan approach back at the TEM. I think if we can communicate to you what we think the fundamental architecture looks like, if we can apply industry standards to the architecture that allow industry to say, I understand IEEE, I understand APIs, I understand SOSA. If I have access to those specific interoperability standards, then industry can say, I can see where I can plug in. If I can't communicate that to you guys, you're going to come up and try to sell me Next-Gen C2. And I think I made the comment in the last panel, nobody has Next-Gen C2 because it's an ecosystem of things. So I need to show you an architecture that helps you understand where we're at today. And as I'm changing it, I need to be able to communicate that to you guys in the industry side as well. So as I get feedback from the unit to say, I need to go this way. I'm a light guy. I want to operate with this kind of capability versus a heavy guy who wants a different capability. I need to figure out the forum using like the joint communication marketplace to communicate that out to industry so you guys see what's going on. And then I need to go back to the Hill. I need to explain to those folks who are responsible to our taxpayers saying, this is how we want to spend the government's money. How all of that's happening at that speed so they can be reactive. I think one aspect, and it came up a little bit in your panel, Shimon, I think the shift away from programs being aligned with specific technologies, specific solutions, like WinT, for example, and start shifting programs to be aligned with capabilities. As we started C2 Fix, assured voice was one of the 3 things that every commander said they had to maintain. You can jack up everything else, but if I can still call my commander and talk to him, I can see. So I need to look for a capability, and I need to communicate to both industry and to the Hill. A portfolio is assured voice. SINGARS is a mechanism I could get to assured voice, but I don't need to put a requirement out for SINGARS. I need to get a requirement for assured voice. I need to communicate to the Hill, I'm going to buy solutions that support assured voice. And then as I get the feedback from the commander at the right echelon, at the right formation type, at the right year, and industry saying, this is what I can provide, this is what I want, then I can go for a capability delivery, not a material solution delivery. So that's part of that communication back to the Hill, how we kind of take this agile process where the unit's being innovative, the ACMs are trying to be innovative, the PM trying to be innovative. How do I communicate that back to the Hill? I think shifting towards a portfolio view. And I think one of the questions that came up earlier in the panel was, in the old days, you would go to the J book, and if you guys are not a building guy, that doesn't mean anything to you, but for the industry guys, that's what the Hill sees when they talk about money. It is the little note on the bottom of a check, like what was this check for? Well, this check is for that. If I can open up that aperture a little bit and speak to capabilities, you're not going to see, System X from Company X and District 7 of the, New Jersey, state legislator. You're going to start seeing broader statements. So that's a little bit of comfort level that we have to be able to communicate back to both the industry and the Hill so that we can all be in the same sheet to where the money's going, and then be agile enough in the area of execution to deliver to the commander. So hopefully that hits a little bit.
No, that's great. Thanks, Ward. Back to you, General Kalushin. So let's talk about prototyping and connecting that with requirements. So how will prototyping activities in 4th ID, 25th ID, and 3 Corps headquarters inform the Next-Gen C2 requirements? And what is the significance of the most recent characteristics of needs update for Next-Gen C2?
So I think this first comment can be related even to that second question about how this is different with 4ID than what we did at PCC 5. So what we did not do, I told you, scale is the major factor, but what we did not do is we've not done a .mil-PF analysis, right? What we've done is delivered an M capability to an armored battalion up to this point. Now we're delivering an M capability to a division. So we're delivering the material solution for next generation command and control. Now, the rest of the Army is involved, right? This is no longer an AFC/Future T2Com initiative. Our centers of excellence are going to be heavily involved. Cyber Center of Excellence and the Mission Command Center of Excellence are the top 2. And really now what the Mission Command Center of Excellence will bring is they'll provide a full .mil-PF assessment. So what 4ID has done, what General Ellis has directed, is we are going to have a string of exercises called Ivy Sting. The Ivy Sting series will be 6 exercises in length. It'll be followed by a mass division exercise called Ivy Mass in May of 26. And that'll be the final prep before they put stuff in line haul and get it to NTC for PCC 6. So that's kind of where we are. But that .mil-PF assessment Now the Mission Command Center of Excellence can focus in on that. And they can ensure that I will tell you the most important thing that we have done to this point, or what we have seen and learned from, is just the warfighters telling us what is good and what is bad. Where can we improve? What really works? And that helps us design the ecosystem, right? So we will ensure, based on multiple touch points with soldiers, that we will receive that feedback. The Mission Command Center of Excellence will compile all of that data based on, the warfighter, it's qualitative and the quantitative data coming back from the warfighters and what is executed in the field. They'll compile that to make sure that we have a full report, because once again, we're fielding this to enablers. We're fielding this to different entities or organizations than we have in the past. We haven't done this at a level where we need to manage the network, where we have to sustain the network, sustain the equipment. So we are going to learn wholeheartedly across the board throughout the .mil PF. So that's a big thing in the prototype for us over the course of the next 10 months. So it's not just the M portion of this, it is really across the .mil PF. The requirements side of this. So we updated, if you're not familiar with the characteristics of need, I'm going to give you a quick overview of what that is. So General Rainey's vision is that we approach the requirements process differently than we have in the past. JSIDS is a dirty term. We don't want to be pointed towards JSIDS at all. The Army, the Joint Force, we're all moving away from this antiquated process that is too slow, too cumbersome, and is never going to be able to meet and stay ahead of the pace of technological change. So JSIDS is dirty. We're doing everything in our power to get away from it, right? So we have created, the first thing is a characteristics of need. We have done one base document that was approved by the chief at the end of PCC4. We have updated that twice since. So the most recent was, I think, in April or May, where General Rainey signed the latest update to the characteristics of need. We post those on sam.gov. Right, so that's posted for everyone to be able to access so they can see. And what the characteristics of need statement does is it provides a list of characteristics. We start with 9, I think we're up like to maybe 12 now, but these are the characteristics that we need industry help with, right? And I will tell you, like this last iteration, so we took the results and the lessons learned from PCC5 and we updated that document. One of the things that we added in that document is, how do we enable command and control with the use of artificial intelligence, right? And so that is a new key characteristic that I just wanted to make sure I highlighted, because once again, Next Gen C2 is about decision making. It's about enabling the commander. It is ultimately about decision dominance over a peer enemy, right? So that's what we wanted to add to make sure, hey, this is Next Gen C2 is about making sure that we have the applications to access across all of the warfighting functions. But what we really understand, the way technology is moving right now, the power of artificial intelligence, we have to set up the ecosystem now to be able to harness that, because that's ultimately what's going to allow our commanders to be able to synthesize the amount of data on the battlefield and make those timely decisions. So that's the characteristics of need. Where we are getting away from the JSIDS process is we are doing everything non-traditional. And this was approved by General George. We just went through a process, the AROC process, everything got approved. So the next step in this thing is we have annexes. So I talked to you about what the technical stack is, right? So now the characteristics of need statement is we add more specificity in the requirement by having an annex for each layer of the stack. So we have an application annex. We're going to have a data layer annex. We're going to have an infrastructure annex, and we're going to have a transport annex. And out of those annexes, and that probably provides like the core, but we're staying away from like strict KPPs on this, right? Because I think that's counterproductive when you put really strict metrics on requirements, because we put like some crazy rules on things, and frankly, it's counterproductive and it's unnecessary. So we're still trying to keep this broad enough where we can see the whole of what industry has to offer. So that's what the annex does. It provides additional specificity, but it doesn't get into the weeds where we're putting hard metrics on anything. And then from there, when we really want to get into the requirement, and the next year with 4ID is going to help us get there, we're going to have appendices. And just like if you think like an order format, right, we're going to have that annexes, and then we're going to have appendices. And those appendices are going to dive down a little bit more what the requirements are needed. And they're also going to do it based on what type of formation we may have to support. So for instance, transport is going to look different for the 82nd Airborne Division than it's going to look for 4ID, right? And we have to understand that's just a fact. That's fine. But we have to capture it somehow. So that's the plan. So little long-winded way of just saying our characteristics of need is the foundational core document that changes the requirements process. And then from there, we have a non-traditional way of making sure that we highlight what those requirements are. But it all starts with the characteristics, the core characteristics, and all starts making sure that we are sharing that with industry, right? So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. There is a sense of urgency on the way that we get this done. Everything that we learn now, we are in this prototype phase. Do not think that we're going to be sitting in this prototype phase for long. Now, I told you that Next Gen C2 is never going to be finished. We are always going to be evolving, and we're always going to need the capability to quickly on and off ramp new capability. That is going to be tough for us to harness, right? But there is certainly a sense of urgency that we need to get going. Because in 30 months, we will be done with the entire Army. That's General George's guidelines. That's his intent. 30 months. We're going to go from 4ID to 25th ID to a host of new units that are going to be selected here shortly, and then exponential across the Army. Just think about what that means. And we will not win the next war without Compo 2 and Compo 3. So if we can't figure out how to do this affordably for the Army and do it at that rapid scale, then we're going to lose, right? The sense of urgency is real. We have to get this done. We have to get it done right. We're not growing additional money, so we have to figure out how to do it within our existing budget and where we can plan the budget to be. So it's a massive challenge for this entire team. Hopefully that answered the question there, Sherman.
No, great, sir. Appreciate it. It's tying it all together to be able to communicate to the Hill, communicate to our industry partners, communicate to our warfighters, and all of them are in the same audience here today. So back to you, Julia. Next Gen C2 has been described as putting the commander back in command and control, C2. So how do we keep the signaleers with a seat at the table to help their bosses implement all of the sensors, all of the capabilities that are coming in this ecosystem of Next Gen C2?
Yeah, so General Rainey's quote, to finish the quote, right? It's, put the commander back in command and control, put the SIGO back in the S6. So, right, really clear. So you heard about it needs to be simple at the edge. We heard John Kalushin just talk about that. We heard Major Johnson talk about that yesterday, right? That a smartphone that a 5-year-old could use. It needs to be simple, intuitive, ease of use to enable that commander to make data-driven decisions. That does not mean that the ecosystem itself is simple. That's a bit of the friction that's going on. Is we absolutely must have the concept to be easy to grasp, but easy is hard. And so everything within that ecosystem itself is complicated. And so that's where putting the SIGO back in the 6 is putting that responsibility on that signaleer to make sure that all of this works. And that's an extremely heavy lift. And Shimon, to use some of your words from earlier this morning, yeah, every single thing that's in a transformation and contact modernization capability is an emitter. It emits within the spectrum. It connects to the network through some form of transport. It has data that must be moved. It must be shared. And that's all complicated. And so we need to prepare the signaleers to be able to take on that equipment. And as I said, know how to use it for their commander. It is a heavy lift because every single unit is going to look differently, which is another aspect of Next Gen C2, as you just heard, is that in the past, we may have been able to have a couple different types of units that we had to train to. Now, it is every single unit is going to look different. And so you're going to have a staff sergeant, PCS, from Hawaii with one flavor of Next Gen C2 to Fort Drum and fall in something that looks completely different with a completely different type of transport, completely different type of infrastructure, specialized apps for that organization. And so they need to be prepared to get up to speed very quickly and be able to provide solutions to their commander. Some of it may be, hey, this is what we did in 25th ID and this is what worked best for us. Others are, I see your need here, I understand the equipment, and this is how I can better enable you. The signaleers, we may have recently been more creating networks for ourselves, just understanding the enterprise itself. Now we're past that. We are an integrator of all these modernization capabilities. And we need to be able to sit at the table and say, this is how this is all going to work together. Because I think the idea of putting commanders back in command and control is they don't necessarily care how it works. They just want it to work. And so that's what we need to be prepared to do.
Thanks, Julia. So over to you, General Kalushin. How would you, this is kind of our bonus question. I think it's sliding to you right now. The question would be, for this audience, what can this audience do to help you deliver Next Gen C2? What would you challenge the audience to do?
So I would challenge you to think through the layers of the stack. If you're an individual company looking to see how they can be involved in next generation command and control, I would tell you that what we value as an Army is companies that can self-organize to meet the requirement. What is more difficult for the Army is looking at a bunch of one-off vendors and figuring out how it fits into an ecosystem. But coming in as part of a team, that's pretty powerful, right? So I don't want to get in the acquisition talk or speak. It's not my lane. But I will tell you, it becomes a lot more attractive and easier to integrate when a team is already formed. And so I would tell you from that standpoint, think through what that looks like for you based on what you deliver and where you think you could fit into the ecosystem. If you think individually about each layer of the stack, think through the fact, take the time to learn what's going on in Ukraine, right? We certainly are, and industry should be doing the same thing, right? So learn about what and how warfare is changing. Warfare is fundamentally adapting and changing right now. You know this, you can see it, you see it on the news. We are going to have to adapt even faster. So think through the threat, right? We understand that we are going to be threatened, at least in the electromagnetic spectrum. We really will be threatened in every domain. But the purpose of this conversation is we are certainly not going to dominate the EMS, but we have to figure out how to do so, right? It's all about decision making. It's all about command and control, the access and the assurance that our commanders can make better, faster, more decisions than the enemy. And it's also about the ability to ensure that we are degrading our enemy's ability to make those decisions, right? So enhance and increase our OODA loop, take away the ability of the commander of the enemy to be able to do the same. So even in those regards, even if it doesn't tightly nest into our ecosystem, think about some of the challenges we think we're going to have in the future. Think about the fact that you cannot be hidden in the future fight. There are too many sensors out there seeing everything that you do. So ensure that, help us figure out how do we provide those decoy capabilities and how do we deceive the enemy at least a little bit from being able to target us accurately. So that's a part, to me, that's a part of transport. We have to be able to move data, but we also have to ensure we're doing so in a way that it's really difficult for the enemy to be able to target us. So think through H layer, transport, the fact that we are, going to be going up against a contested or a sophisticated enemy that can contest us in every single domain. And I would say that's the biggest thing, but help us think, right? Help us think through what the future fight's going to look like. And that's where the conversation, I think, starts.
Thank you, sir. I think, for the audience, our CFT director, the entity and the person who's responsible for helping us to get this delivered, it just gave us marching orders. And so I will tell you, we want to turn it over to you and give you questions, but I think he just gave you what you can do to help us get this across and get it out into the field, because we all know in this space we've had to do it, and we finally got we got energy, we got the resources, and we got the prioritization to get it done. And so with that, I'll turn it out to the audience for questions, because there's probably plenty. Over to you, sir.
So once again, it goes back, it's a really good question. It goes back to the data layer. And I will tell you that we are prioritizing making sure we get the Army healthy first. Understand that we will only win with partners. Get it, totally understand. But we have to determine what the data layer is going to look like. It's a big question, right? We're talking about international partners. We have to be thinking for the joint force as well, right? So how are we sharing data with our joint partners and then with our coalition partners as well? We've got to figure that part out. But for me, there's a modernized data architecture or structure out there. We're using APIs, we're using microservices now. Like those are the things that are going to enable us to be able to communicate flatly and to be able to share data flatly across a data layer. So that's to me, I think setting the data layer is the most important piece. Once we set that and we do so with a modernized data architecture, then the rest of this becomes easy. Because the rest of the world is quickly adapting towards these standards as well, right? And we certainly know that the joint force is. So I think this becomes far easier once we establish what that right data layer looks like and we're able to share that. Once again, the data layer is everything. Microservices that each app is going to be able to ride on and use that data should be no different than what we're doing in the way that we're going to share with a joint partner or with a coalition partner. So I will tell you it's being considered, but we've got to get this part right first.
Over to you, Dave.
I will say I don't know, and we're not beholden to any UDRA or anything like that, right? This is, I'm going to let Mr. Roberts might have something he wants to add to that, but I would tell you we are not beholden to any UDRA, and certainly we are doing things, we are adapting as a clean sheet approach to command and control, so we are not tied or beholden to any set standard.
No, I didn't want to answer, but I think I'll just add on to it. I think it's a reference point to understand things, but I agree. It is not a binding thou must. I think industry is showing us where we can take advantage of best practices from industry. And I think that's kind of driving as much as any kind of, Army level policy. But I guess maybe back to industry, if you see that something's missing, that we need some kind of guiding architecture like that, it would help out. Or if something is out there that's holding us back, please let us know. Because I think the intent was there. I don't know if we got it right or if it answers all the right questions, but if it gets in the way, let us know. If it helps, let us know. Both of that would be good feedback as well.
Gentleman behind you, sir, in the blue. Behind the gentleman in the blue. Go ahead, sir. Yep, you. No, that's a great point. That's a great point. So I'll put my trail boss hat back on. One of the first things we learned when we went out did C2 Fix was with 8 PEOs, 24 PMs, all delivering capabilities according to the requirements and the resources that they had, nobody was wrong, but nobody was delivering one effect. And so as a trail boss, we were able to establish a governance structure for making decisions basically in the dirt and sometimes to the left of it. And that governance structure was built of somebody from the requirement side in Fix. It was the Mission Command Center of Excellence. Then on the PM side, I had all of the ASALT teammates. And then we had representatives from ForceCom. We had representatives from the various COEs, and then we also had representatives from the building. to help us with prioritization. Maybe you need this capability pulled to the left. Maybe you need that capability fully tested out. So PM, I need you to deliver it. Oh, that PM had a priority from the Army that said they should go here, but we need them there to make sure it all works. That governance structure now also includes, now in Next Gen C2, it's now the unit rep, the project owner, which is the CFT. You also have the PM for Next Gen C2, the particular data and the apps layer. You have Mission Command Center of Excellence representing the warfighter and all of the centers. And then you have me as the trail boss bring together all of the other ASALT and material developer equities. And so in that structure, we are making decisions as needed, ad hoc. Sometimes it's via email. Sometimes we bubble friction points up to GOs. But for the most part, we try to get it done at the 06 and below so we can keep moving as fast as possible. General Kalushin or Mr. Roberts, I'll put it back over to you. Anything to add to that?
No, I think you captured it very well, right? And I'll just add, I just want to stress the importance of what we've learned in having the trail boss be a part of this. And he said earlier on his panel, Colonel Dayon talked about the fact that he has a 4ID badge right now, and he has office space co-located with the CG, well, in the same vicinity as the CG. There's a reason for that, right? Because Colonel Dayon, as the trail boss, is orchestrating all activities, but he's doing so from Fort Carson. And so it's really important that we have something like that, an entity of, it's Colonel Dayon now, it could be somebody else in the future, but having somebody like that that can actually harness and synchronize all activities across all the PMs and really across all of the efforts and on behalf of the user is hugely important and beneficial and is going to be a sustain for the future.
Yeah, so much and so that my boss made me move back to the headquarters. And so I now have a war room and another shop that we'll stand up and we'll codify it. Because it was one of the first lessons in the C2 fix assessment. First assessment said, establish a trail boss full time. And so we'll be doing that really soon here in POC3N. And it's also going to be happening across ASAL. Other priority efforts will be getting trail bosses that'll be kind of doing some of that same synchronization across the spectrum of what it takes to deliver a capability. Okay, so sir, in the blue jacket, you were next. Okay, so I think the way I heard the question was, is data-centric warfare is it more about democratizing the data? In other words, everybody get it? Or is it more about understanding the behavior and being able to respond to the data or make decisions? I'll turn it over to you, sir.
I'll say it's certainly about access, and I think it's a little bit of both. If democratizing the data means that across our data layer, that data is going to be accessible and usable, then I would say that's absolutely a fundamental principle of Next Gen C2. It has to be accessible, it has to be usable, and because that's what's going to drive decision making. Now, I think what we don't understand or where we're trying to build towards is data sets, data sources are going to continue to expand rapidly. Sensors on the battlefield are rapidly expanding. We are going to have multiple sources of data. The key for us to figure out, which I think is going to be really difficult to do, and it kind of goes back to the artificial intelligence discussion I had earlier. I think it's going to be the force that is able to synthesize and ingest that data the fastest and make sense of it is the force that's going to win tomorrow's wars. We are not going to outman China. We are not going to outgun China. The only way that we're going to do this is going to be able to have better battlefield situational awareness and have a better decision-making capability than China. So that is the key. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I want to foot stomp on the fact that we need to have the data accessible and usable, and we're going to have to think things differently. It's not coming from traditional sources. We are going to have private and commercial, public, government sources of data at every classification level that we're going to have to quickly sort through and make sense of in order to win tomorrow's war. So hopefully that somewhat answers your question. That gets back to my software-defined networking comment. We have to understand, because the data not only has to be accessible and usable, if it's going to be, it has to be survivable, right? And we have to do so in a way that we're able to move the data around the battlefield. So that is the intelligent aspect of what our network needs to become. How do we ensure that data gets to where it needs to be?
Sir, if I could add, I think the amount of transport we intend to give to units should give them the ability to get to that cloud, to get to that data. The challenge, though, becomes is it the right decision for the commander to use that transport? Does he need to turn it off for protection? Does he need to be moving where he can't use it at some time? So I think a gap where we could probably use both input from industry and then the feedback from the commanders is understanding what tools can help the commander understand what data he might need so that when he needs to go disconnected, he has the right data. And I use the Netflix analogy of I can deliberately go to Netflix and download a particular movie, or I can subscribe to a series of series and it'll download the next episode every time. So finding tools that will help the commander not have to think about what data he's going to need, but know what data is going to be and automatically pre-position it for him. I think that's an area where we need to figure out that use case, because we go into it thinking I'm always going to have LEO SATCOM availability, I'm always going to have commercial 5G throughput, is great until it's not great anymore. And then what does that commander do? And if you ask any commander what data you need, he's never going to be able to answer it holistically. So a gap, an area where industry can help us figure out is what tools are available to help using AI or whatever to help the commander and his staff pre-pro that data. So when the signal goes off and he's still got to operate, he has at least the right amount of data still available for that period of time. So I think kind of spin off that a little bit to General Kalushian's comments. I think that's an area where I think industry might be able to help us figure that out.
Yeah, so we're at the point where we got room for one more question. Sir, you were first. Please do.
First, talked about they need assets from space and like over-classified arena. How do you get classified data to move freely among the warfighter where it's needed?
Freely move, that's an interesting question. So I think by us pushing most of our data to the cloud and using cross-domain solutions in the cloud, that allows us, at least at that level, to share the data between the different classification environments. I don't know if we know yet what the need is at the lower echelons. I think in the C2 fixed architecture, we had some specific use cases. We focused holistically on SBU as the brigade and below, and then a few use cases where we needed to get intel data or air data. I think hopefully coming out of PC5 and some feedback from the commanders as we start executing SBU at scale, I think will help us understand. But I think we're still struggling with what that actually looks like in the battlefield. I don't know, sir, if you're going to.
No, I think you answered it, but this is what classification is required at each echelon, what mission threads are required to be classified secret and what are not, right? So the SBUE comment that Mr. Roberts just made is a good one. That's a great win that C2 fix / tick has gotten us to at this point. There is no reason to overclassify data. That just gets us in trouble, right? So if it's tactical, perishable data, then there's no reason to classify that secret. If it's something that by the time the enemy captures it, it's irrelevant, then I think that's what we're trying to determine. So that helps us think through what the lower echelons are going to need in the fight, and thinking through specific threads, what are classified threads and need to stay and remain classified. We have to identify what those are and at what echelon do they need to reside. Fires is a good one, right? We're figuring out how to declassify as much as the fires process as we possibly can, and we're making good, gains in that area. But this is, I think, at the end of the day, based on what we learn, this is going like the security classification guide. We're going to rewrite that, and we'll be able to figure out something. And because also, SBUE doesn't mean that we're not encrypting and protecting our data. Also, so what's the risk? We have to determine, does everything have to be classified secret? I don't think so, right? Based on technology and on the way that we're encrypting our information today. That gets back to the data-centric model. We're not encrypting the network, we're encrypting the data. It's getting back to zero trust. This thing that we are constantly trying to achieve, that is really where this goes. So hopefully that helps.
All right, folks. One more in the corner, Chief. Go ahead. Yeah, so we learned a lot of valuable lessons out at C2 Fix. One, commercial devices that you can buy at Walmart don't last in the snowy, icy, soldier-proofed breaking off the back of the truck. And it was really about the small things. It was cables that weren't ruggedized, that the ends of it. It was the EUD device. When you open it up, water was getting behind and the O-rings weren't keeping them. They were shorting out and soldiers were walking around looking like a little TP of smoke, right? So we were learning those things. And I'll be honest with you, Chief, is that we have been moving so fast that we're learning it. And that's part of the learning, the sustainment part of it. So as PMs, what we started doing is building in more sparing of those things that are breaking fast. As units, we were asking them to also protect the equipment better and educating them on what we were finding. So the O-ring on the EUD device, ice and water getting behind it, making sure that got as far wide to the next unit. Nobody had to make the same mistake, making sure that the O-rings got there in delivery in time. And then, the longer term plan is, I think, sustainment. General Ternetti mentioned it in the previous one. They are retooling. They are retooling to be more responsive and to be at the point of need earlier. No longer of waiting, like Colonel Donnelly mentioned, waiting until the whole Army's got it before we have a plan. So on the CCOM side, they are retooling. As we buy more commercial kit, we're realizing we need to buy more sparing. And then also, we're also learning and educating the force on how to protect the kit better. The next big sacred cow, in my opinion, is changing the rest of the apparatus to allow for more modular units. For example, when you get a new piece of kit, your trim dollars, your sustainment dollars in your unit still tied to the old kit until you replace the new kit. Well, in some cases, you're going to have both. And so you need the money that's according to, you may need dollars to sustain a Star Shield that are better aligned to what Star Shield provides you than what a WinT provided you. And so that's the stuff that we're also tackling actively around the apparatus, the entire enterprise has to modularize, be more modernized, and be more modular. So with that, that's our last question, folks. We appreciate everybody coming in. We really appreciate the everybody's taking interest in it. We'll be here for a bit to be able to service any questions that you have from there. Thank you. Have a great day.